Well, hello and welcome to this VideoNet webcast, where today we're talking about future-proofing ad-supported connected TV for Primetime, which refers, of course, to the rapid growth in connected TV viewing and the fact that media owners need to fully monetize those viewers as they move from broadcast networks into streaming. And we also need to make sure that they've got a great advertising user experience as well. So among the themes we're addressing today are whether connected TV provides an opportunity to improve or actually to reset the advertising experience in the US, and whether we can improve how we deliver audiences. So there will be some discussion around media owner data and targeting and guarantees. We're also going to look at some of the key technology issues around ad-supported connected TV, like managing direct and programmatic demand, ensuring great ad performance, especially when scaling for live events, and the relative merits of server-side and client-side dynamic ad insertion and trends in their usage. Now, as you can see, we're on video today and our panelists are waiting to get stuck in, and I'll introduce them in a moment. Chris has dialed in just because of a technical issue. And before I do introduce the panelists, I just want to point out that obviously we are live. So if you want to ask questions, you can. And we plan to stop at least once to take audience questions. And there's a button on your console. So press that and just fire off the question. It comes straight into my in tray. We also have some resources for you to download. They're all relevant to today's subject. So I would encourage you to take a look at those. And we're also going to ask you a poll question today. And I will publish it properly later, which is when we'll do the votes. But I'll just show you as a preview now. So please don't vote yet, but I'm just going to show you the poll now, so hopefully you can see that. And the question basically is more of a statement really, but it's we need a generational upgrade in the advertising technology and processes in order to fully monetize this opportunity. Do you agree or disagree? And then as you can see, there are 4 options varying from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Okay, so we'll come back to that later. So let me introduce the speakers then. I'm delighted to welcome Jessica Dufresne, who is Head of Advertising Operations and Digital Advertising Technology at Dish Media. We have Byron Saltisack, who is VP of Video and Connected Devices at Warner Media, and Chris Hock, who is Head of Business Development and Strategy for Media and Entertainment at Adobe. So a big welcome to all of you.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Okay, so Byron, let's start with you then. I mean, when you look at the connected TV streaming services in the USA, I mean, there is a lot of ad innovation in terms of ad load and formats. I mean, do you think that connected TV provides an opportunity to actually rethink the ad experience for US viewers?
I think that connected TV is definitely part of the strategy going forward. What we have seen in the last, 10 years is with SVOD services, users have gotten very used to lower ad loads, and the traditional ad model is being disrupted. We need other solutions. So, one example of that is our like with football or soccer, type of content, sometimes different types of content doesn't lend itself very well to breaking away to ad and coming back and being disruptive. So there's ideas of how do you do overlay ads, how do you do squeeze backs and other types of maybe interactive experiences that certainly connected TVs as well as other digital devices will be key in moving us forward into this new model of advertising.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned sort of some of the innovations there, like overlay and squeeze backs and obviously interactivity. I mean, does that rely on client-side intelligence? I mean, are you limited with what you can do right now in terms of the devices you can go to, or do you have a free hand?
Yeah, and I know we'll talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of client-side versus server-side. What we're talking about with most of this is client-side required, and part of that is, and this is where we'll get into with the connected TVs, is versus a phone or a computer. Connected TVs have a pretty small currently device footprint in terms of CPU, memory, and other things. So while this is the area of innovation, I think we have to also be careful of what type of workloads we're pushing down to the client side, because they may not be able to support it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite surprising that connected TVs should be the lowest of all those devices. But, I mean, currently, do you need to sort of gear your innovations to the lowest common denominator, or can you give a sort of a basic ad experience to some and then try and make it more intelligent or sophisticated on some devices?
Yeah, so we do have an ability to target sort of lowest common denominator and then layer on top of that. And the smart TV providers that I've worked with all have the ability to allow you to do targeting to different lineages of their devices. So you can actually have more sophisticated applications go to their more sophisticated devices.
Okay. And Chris, I know you, Adobe, you did a survey of media owners on what they think is a bad advertising experience. So we're not talking about what consumers think, but what the media owners themselves think. I mean, what did they say?
Yeah, we recently conducted a comprehensive survey of over 250 ad tech leaders and really found some interesting points. First, we looked at, do publishers, believe the viewer experience is important, and are they following through and measuring that? And 80% of the publishers in the survey believe that measuring user experience is important, yet only 21% of the publishers reported that their viewing experiences were good, based on their own verified measurements. And 40% were still not yet measuring the viewing experience. So we do feel that there's probably a little bit of room to grow there. But then on, what is that poor ad experience and what factors contribute? Really, there was no singularly important factor. There were a number of them. Too many ads came in at like 40%. There's, the number of ads was also an important factor. I think surprisingly, the audio volume was another important factor. I think surprisingly, the quality of the video experience was not as important as repetitive ads, irrelevant ads, and too many ads. I think this may be an indicator that maybe in addition to the ads being optimized per viewer, maybe the ad experience does as well.
Yeah, so repetitive ads, that was kind of third on the list, I think. That got 31%, didn't it? So in terms of what they were worried about.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the poor ad video quality, I mean, that's very low. So it was obviously doing a very good job, everybody on the quality side. So Jessica, I mean, that repetition, I mean, that's, like I said, it featured quite highly. I mean, how big a challenge is frequency management right now?
It's definitely a challenge, and it's something that the CTV ad tech industry needs to address on how to manage. And it's a challenge due to the fact that on CTV you have multiple demand pipes, direct IOs, coming from an ad server, different SSP pipes. Oftentimes, media companies are monetizing their supply with resellers who have their own pipes, and there's not right now really solid solution where you have a centralized system that can actually literally read in real time the ads coming through all these different demand pipes to manage frequency across the board for, say, a single streaming service. Additionally, like Sling is a virtual MVPD, and in addition to having these different demand pipes on our own inventory for Dish Media, we also split monetization rights and share that with different partners, say like our programming partners, for example, and they have their own ad servers and their own demand pipes feeding into that DAI CTV inventory as well.
Okay, so I mean, it sounded like you didn't have a really obvious, solid solution to sort of deal with frequency management. I mean, is there anything you can do? I mean, is there any sort of easy wins?
So, I mean, there's the industry initiative with Universal Ad ID. I mean, that is definitely a potential solve, but it's going to require adoption from media companies to the whole ad tech ecosystem, and as well from the buy side to use the ad ID for their campaigns. Another potential solve is through automated tools like AI or ACR, for example, to actually read the creative copy coming through for an OTT service, and then being able to classify it and manage frequency at that point across the board.
Okay, so that AI where you read the ad, I mean, you just literally look at the copy and the system would say, we've seen this already, this creative has already been on here 5 minutes before.
Right. So it reads it, it classifies it. I mean, the user would have to be able to set up some sort of like rules and classification rules as well. The AI or ACI, it'd have to pick up on different signals as it reads that copy to be able to classify it and then map it back to any like frequency management rules that have been put into place.
Okay, and Chris, I mean, Jessica mentioned there about the sort of complexity of the resellers, the sort of the IO and the sort of programmatic sort of demands. So if we're using multiple ad servers, I mean, that must, obviously it's a very complex situation. I mean, what is, what's the issue or the solution for you?
Yeah, I think, frequency capping is a pretty standard feature of a publisher's ad server, and it works pretty well for scenarios where the publisher owns 100% of the inventory and it's all direct sold, going through one ad server. But as streaming matures, the scenario becomes less frequent. So, as we're talking about, and as Jessica mentioned, in today's environment, the inventory is often split between publishers and distributors, maybe platform providers as well. And further, inventory is increasingly being fulfilled programmatically. It means there's multiple ad servers involved and no, what I like to call kind of cross ADS or cross ad server frequency controls really become a challenge. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the challenge piece of it.
And in terms of the solutions, Chris, I mean, you work on the Streaming Video Alliance, don't you? And are they looking at something around sort of ad copy and how to try and help with this?
Yeah, I think Jessica also mentioned some interesting things. Certainly some interesting tech on the horizon, leveraging ACR to determine and prevent duplicate ads is one method. And broader adoption of that unique identifier for advertising campaigns. Ad ID may be another. Yeah, and I co-chair the advertising working group at the Streaming Video Alliance. And one of the initiatives we're working on is establishing and popularizing best practices for including ad ID in content manifest files or the outputs of your dynamic ad insertion solution. We found that even when an ad ID is present, even when maybe it's been entered into the ad server and it makes it down to the ad response in its proper place in the vast spec, it may not make it down to the player in the stitched stream. So one of the specific initiatives that we're working on right now is defining where in a HLS and or a dash stream is the appropriate place to deliver the ad ID. So the downstream players can get the information about what the viewer is consuming, and then maybe potentially make decisions there about optimizing or at least giving some feedback on how many duplicate ads are being presented.
Okay, and Byron, I mean, media buyers sort of are increasingly interested in targeting. I mean, for various reasons, but I mean, do you see ad relevance as part of that bigger picture for the actual advertiser user experience that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the same way that traditional advertisement experiences are competing with, SVOD services that literally don't have ads, we're also competing with experiences like Facebook that are extremely targeted, or other ones that have a lot of information, first-party information about users. So I think people have gotten used to that level of knowledge about them and in their advertisement, and I think it's gone from somewhat overly creepy to just a useful experience. So wow, yeah, I might be interested in that item. So I think that is an area for us to innovate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know Sky have found with Sky Ad Smart that the tuning is better with targeted advertising. So I guess that sort of proves the point, really. Okay, and I mean, Jessica, just sort of staying on this subject, sort of targeting and relevance, what data do you have that you can sort of use to help with the targeting? Because I mean, I presume you have sort of good first-party data.
Yeah, so for both Dish and Sling, we have our first-party subscriber data that we use at the core of our addressable business across both linear and digital or OTT on Sling. So we work with over a dozen different third-party data vendors who then enrich for our first-party data with their additional data, and we can, with them, create all these different custom audience segments, and also they perform the post-campaign measurement, which is the other piece to a successfully targeted campaign, is the measurement piece of it.
Okay, and so the custom segments, are you going as far as sort of doing these data matches where an advertiser matches their data against yours so they can perhaps find customers or avoid existing customers, and it all goes through these lovely sort of clearing houses that's all privacy compliant, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. So, right, and that's one of the reasons we do have so many data partners, is that so that our advertising clients as well can match their customer data with our subscriber data.
Okay. Now I've got
in a secure manner.
Yes. Okay. Now, just a reminder that we're going to have hopefully a question break soon. So do send them in if you've got some. Also, just a reminder that there's resources that you can download. And so, Chris, in connected TV, a lot of the selling, as I understand it, is still on demo-based guarantees. And I suppose that's kind of like a sort of carryover from the linear world. I mean, you think it's time to move on from that, don't you? So just tell us why.
Yeah, you know, I definitely think it's time, and the industry is certainly shifting to audience-based and or performance-based deliveries and guarantees. You know, and I think that's a positive thing. You know, at Adobe, over 75% of the Ad Age top 100 advertisers have the first-party data in one of our Adobe Experience Cloud solutions. And those brands that are making significant investment in, you know, unifying the data behind their profiles and their users, they want to be able to leverage that data on paid media as well as on their own media. So it's certainly you know, very important to support these audience-based, performance-based, these alternative currencies. You know, that said, we also recognize, though, that there may be reasons that some publishers may want to continue to maintain a portion of their inventory on demo, you know, for various reasons. For example, you know, it's a higher CPM than selling Persons 2+. Or the ability, you know, John, as you hinted towards, the ability to bundle with live TV and digital into a single package, or, you know, fulfill demo commitments made during a maybe an upfront deal or so forth. So, you know, that said, I think it's the key for publishers is really being able to deliver and optimize the revenue and the experiences in a multi-currency world, you know. Whether it's a traditional demo-based, if that's fitting part of your goals, you know, and certainly an audience and or performance-based currency.
Okay, and I mean, your survey, I think you covered demos on that as well. Or certainly there's a figure that I saw from Adobe where 75% of media owners said that they reserve 10% or more for demo guarantees, just for safety margin. Is that right?
That is right. You know, our research showed more than 75% of companies surveyed reporting substantial ad waste when selling their demo guarantees.
Okay.
Yes, and certainly folks are continuing to sell on demo guarantees today.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Jessica, what's your view on demo guarantees?
Yeah, but I mean, I definitely recognize why, especially our advertising clients, certain ones want to buy off of demo guarantees and it being like a single currency tying linear TV and also OTT together. However, it does create, as Chris said, like inventory waste. And then it's because of that as well, a lot of additional lift and time on our executional teams to manage those campaigns to reduce that inventory waste, basically, and try to manually manipulate delivery to hit those demos. And I think moving forward, especially like we see more and more linear TV being able to support addressable or impression-based audience buying, coupled with CTV, which has that audience targeting capabilities today, there will be less of a need for how demo guarantees are structured today. And we should be able to have a targetable audience segment that a campaign is targeting, and the methodology to create that segment is more closely aligned with the post-campaign measurement to verify that the desired demo was actually reached.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, Chris, what is your solution for this? I mean, how do media owners avoid having to build in those kind of generous margins?
Yeah, that's been the challenge in the past is over delivery. You have waste. And as I mentioned before, the 75% of the companies that we surveyed, did say that, hey, they reserve 10% or more to meet those demo guarantees. When you go to medium and large size organizations in the survey, they fare far worse with at least 25% of ad impressions being reserved for over delivery to meet the impression goals. We think that there's interesting ways that publishers can leverage data that they capture in, let's say their Adobe Analytics platform to solve this challenge with some machine learning. And, we're working on some initiatives towards that end with some publishers.
Okay. Now, hopefully everyone's not bored of talking about cookies, because Byron, I mean, my next question to you is, how does cookie deprecation affect you? Obviously, we're talking about third-party cookies here. I mean, is it an issue for Warner Media?
It's certainly a big concern. I mean, here's the interesting thing about it is the movement is absolutely right in terms of let's protect people's privacy and let's make sure uses of people's data is above the board and they know what's happening. I think it's imperative then for media companies and really any app owners to be very explicit about how we're using data and what is the value exchange there. So we talked before about having advertisement being more targeted to a person, and that's generally a desirable experience. Well, if you're getting a cookie warning or something that looks scary, security, you may not be incentivized to hit that button. But so therefore, it's on us to make it clear, here's how I'm using your data. I'm trying to give you a better experience, whether it be an advertisement or maybe just resuming where you were, or some of the other experiences that can come from knowing exactly who a user is and not relying on anonymous data.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, you have a direct-to-consumer service now as well. So I guess, like Dish, you are getting a nice supply of first-party data now. Yeah,
even an example, one of the brands I represent is or support is CNN. There is a you can go in and log in and become a user of that. But what is the right value exchange to use that information to give the right experience to the user? That's what we need to solve for.
Sure. Okay. And Jessica, I mean, I would assume that services like yourselves, who are an MVPD and you're also virtual version, you're probably in a good place, aren't you, in terms of a world that has less sort of easy availability of third-party cookie data, because you do have a good relationship with viewers. I mean, is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I mean, the deprecation of cookies themselves, I mean, we're fortunate to have built our addressable business around our first-party data on both Dish and Sling and never relied on cookies. And we've always been very much privacy first. So this won't particularly have a negative impact for us. I mean, if anything, when it happens, I mean, offer a targeting solution to buyers. However, having said that, I mean, we also just, maybe cookies don't impact us, but there could be things on the horizon with more regulation, such as, you know, along the lines similar to CCPA, or how certain device manufacturers like Apple or their opt-out policies. I mean, those things could affect companies like that, us who actually do have first-party data, and we always need to make sure we're staying ahead of the curve on what's happening out there in the landscape, and so that we can continue effectively operating our advertising business in it.
Okay, and Chris, I mean, are there any kind of issues that we need to look at in this sort of the whole context of improving the sort of the ad experience or the monetization when we're talking about integrating the audience data and the targeting with the actual dynamic ad insertion systems? I mean, are there any sort of, you know, fine tuning or nice improvements we can make there?
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of the challenges have been mentioned by Byron and Jessica. You know, cookies going away, the greater push for data privacy are the obvious ones. You know, there's also challenges of different members of the ecosystem owning some data, and other folks just getting anonymous views, right? So I think of a traditional distributor who might have a relationship with the customer, or a billing relationship for a pay TV customer, and has perhaps data, but a content programmer may just have an anonymous view of the viewer. Right, so I think there's a lot of challenges there. You know, I look at, you know, what the industry kind of needs to resolve is, hey, just becoming for distributors or, you know, programming networks that are going direct to consumer, just becoming a walled garden is not the answer. It's how can you kind of have your data and your customers' data and privacy is protected and under your control, but still invite your clients in to share and use their first-party data to effectively drive advertising on the publisher's network.
Okay. Right, now I've got an audience question here, and I mean, do send them in. I can see a lot of people watching. If you've got a question, this is a great moment to send it in. So this one is from Esper Jess at CISU Tech. And the question is, how does timing of ad insertions affect UX for ad-supported TV, i.e. ad insertions that are too early or too late? I'll just give that one to you, Byron. So come to you first on it, at least.
Sure. And I'm not sure if the question is sort of in regards to the survey or the information that Chris was presenting of where does it fall on the list, but of concerns. But certainly this is the type of thing that we test all the time and make sure that it is as good as we can get it, because it will get flagged as a major concern. It's a bad user experience. What will happen is, if you are not synchronized going into or out of break correctly, you'll see a sliver of potentially a slate or a linear ad that we're going to be covering with the digitally inserted ad. You'll get a bad user experience there, as well as I think it's a bad experience for advertisers to have just, you know, a micro second or whatever of an ad show up and then go away. That's definitely not something that we should be supporting.
No. And Jessica, I mean, are you happy with where we are in terms of that kind of insertion experience as it is today, or does it need some improvement?
I mean, it's really complicated, and I mean, the timing has to be so precise, and there are a lot of moving pieces on the back end. I know on Sling, for example, we're constantly looking to improve it, especially with live programming. But having said that, like, if ad insertion comes too early or too late. You have to build in mechanisms on the back end like that. If it's too late, those ads are discarded. They're just on the back end. They're not airing at all. And either your SSAI or your client-side ad insertion systems have to be able to very quickly identify that there are not actual, say, ads from the server to play, but maybe there are backup ads, or something to mitigate a negative user experience and just make it very seamless on the front end.
Okay, I've got another question here from Kenneth Davey at Rogers Media. It's kind of similar, I guess. It's, can you talk about your experience with live dynamic ad insertion? Well, we're coming to live later, actually, but let's do this first. So we'll focus on live dynamic ad insertion. What are some learnings you can share about ensuring a positive user experience? So without kind of preempting the discussion later, just perhaps if all three of you could just give me like just a couple of quick kind of learnings. Let's start with you, Byron.
Sure. So one quick thing here is, especially when we're talking connected TVs, I prefer a server-side ad insertion model here. And the reason for this is we're all working in a world where we have the adaptive bit rates. And if you're doing client-side ad insertion, what can happen is when you go to ad break, you're in there for, let's say, 3 minutes. During that time, the player will automatically downgrade which rung you're on the delivery, which results in a lower quality stream. So what will happen is, even if you have timing perfect, you'll come out of ad break and potentially you've now moved down the ABR rung to a lower quality stream. So if you are doing SSAI, you're staying on the same rung the entire time, based on the actual user, connectivity and other items that go into that.
Okay, that's a great one. So Jessica, and then Chris, I'll come to you after Jessica.
I agree with what Ron said. And I think SSAI really does improve overall DAI into live programming. Also, I think it's really important to have robust analytics and error reporting as well, and in close to real time as possible to be able to monitor DAI performance. If there's an issue, it can impact user experience, which is always important, whether it's bot or live programming. But if it's, say, a sporting event, or it really is doubles the negativity of that user's experience if something happens to the player. And also to help mitigate any revenue loss as well in live programming, you need those analytics available.
Okay, and
the
Chris,
support staff to quickly react to any problems that crop up.
Okay, Chris, give us one as well.
Yeah, I think if latency is not an issue, one good way to support very large-scale live events where everyone's coming into the ad break at the same time would be to maybe stagger your audiences as they come into the events. Another good tactic when, again, latencies are not an issue. I'll throw out another one here, too. Push on your DAI vendor to, help you test the events. I think you want to do functional testing as well as load testing and make sure you have the right capacity to successfully pull off your event.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, I hope that answered some of the question. So I just want to talk about demand sources now. And Jessica, you use both programmatic and direct sales for streaming. I believe the majority of your ads sold on Sling Media are programmatic. Is that right?
Yeah, we sell, both programmatic and direct, and we do consider ourselves programmatic first.
Do you open up your best inventory to programmatic, or was that just gobbled up during the upfronts?
So all of our inventory is available programmatically. We have built our business around having a lot of private marketplaces and programmatic guarantee. We're I mean, if there are inventory constraints for, say, premium programming, for example, or inventory, then, we do advise buyers that they should consider a programmatic guarantee deal if they want to transact through their programmatic pipes, or a direct IO to guarantee and lock in the inventory. But beyond programmatic guarantee and direct IO, then we do expose across the board our supply to our programmatic auctions, and we keep CPMs at a premium and competitive with our direct business through carefully curated and controlled, again, private marketplaces, programmatic guaranteed deals, and it's up to our buyers how they want to transact with us, whether it's through the more traditional IO or a programmatic auction.
Yeah. And Jessica, still, I mean, do you get a unified view of the direct and programmatic demand? Do you get that holistic view, or is that a work in progress?
I'd say it's a work in progress. We've made a lot of improvements with it, but it's still a challenge from like a yield management perspective to ensure that for every single impression that the ad, say the highest value or CPM is airing, especially given the dynamic nature of programmatic. You really don't know until right before the commercial break airs what demand at what price point is available. And so we haven't seen a trend the last few years with ad tech vendors as well to evolve unified ad decisioning, like say in freewheel, so that programmatic and direct can dynamically compete more. And Google Ad Manager as well, like SpringServe is another ad tech partner that keeps evolving unified ad decisioning.
Okay, and Byron, I know you obviously mix demand sources as well. How can we characterize you? Are you, direct first, programmatic first, or equal?
So generally, we are direct first. Particularly, I'm thinking about our linear, broadcast, sales first, and then programmatic after. Although it really depends on what the content is, and I would, suggest to anyone here, it's not necessary. You really have to think about what type of content and how you need to sell it there. For instance, our Cartoon Network's children's content, that's all direct. We don't open that to programmatic. Some of our more internet-y businesses are more programmatic, or primarily programmatic.
Okay. The reason for that on Cartoon Networks, I mean, are you actually concerned still that something might slip through the net in terms of ad copy that shouldn't be seen by kids?
Well, there's that. There's also KidVid and other additional legal concerns around. You're not allowed to, if you're not familiar with that, you're not allowed to have Scooby-Doo and then have a Scooby-Doo ad right next to it. There's constraints there. So I think that's similar to some of the issues that we were talking about. Detecting the same ad happening over on top, detecting particular characters is difficult as well.
Okay. And Chris, I mean, your survey again, got some good information out of that. You found that it is a very hybrid picture. So sort of what we're seeing here, really, I guess, in terms of how media owners are using direct or programmatic. So just give us a few sort of key statistics from that.
Yeah, what we found is from the survey participants, 66% of the organizations have a direct sales force, but they're also utilizing programmatic channels one way or another. So we've certainly seen the move to the mixed model of direct and programmatic. I think the other interesting data point that we saw is 75% of the organizations that did have that mix of direct and programmatic, still overall they're reserving less than 30% of their inventory for programmatic channels overall of their inventory. And the other thing we kind of looked at is what's the indication of how things will change in the future. Will they go more programmatic, or will organizations go more direct sold? and I think they're or roughly stay the same, and I think it was the feedback that we heard there was hey, unsure or roughly the same. I think there were some outliers, which may have been, smaller media companies that started with programmatic that are evolving to have a direct sales force that said we're going to go more on direct, or there was, maybe some folks that have large direct sales force that are saying we're going to move a little bit more towards programmatic. But by and large, it seems like, both programmatic and direct are going to stay in the repertoire and be used, as Byron, mentions, where and when, the content or the opportunity, makes sense.
Okay. And Byron, we talked earlier about ad load in relation to the user experience, but I mean, obviously ad load has a huge impact on commercialization as well. I mean, do you have any way of knowing or predicting when ad load will kind of lose you a customer? So, I mean, could you sort of work out that if we add one more ad in this show, it will probably actually lose us money because we'll lose X number of subscribers? I mean, can we get to that?
That's one of the powers of digital, right, versus linear is we have the ability to try different ad loads in real time and measure the results of that. So that's certainly the type of thing that our team is looking at in terms of measuring and modifying based on behavior. But it is really powerful to do a multivariate or A/B test to see two different ad loads to a population at the same time and verify what is, we can measure things like how long they stay engaged and compare the different cohorts there. We can do that,
Okay. And then in terms of the technical side, I presume you have lots of metrics to say, if ad load is affecting the actual stream quality. I mean, just talk us through what you can do there.
Yeah. So, as Jessica was mentioning, we're looking at stuff in real time to be able to adjust as needed. One of the things that we look at outside of just the ad world is things like video startup. And I think there's often quoted numbers about if video startup isn't within a particular range, you'll lose users. I know that this is one of those questions around client side or server side. If you're doing server side, you're often stitching an entire manifest up front. So could be stitching an entire movie, 3-hour movie, and that could affect startup time for sure.
Okay. And Chris, you think that the dynamic advertising system itself can play a big role in tracking and sort of understanding ad performance because of where it sits, don't you? Because it's kind of like in the middle of the workflow. I mean, just talk us through that.
Yeah, I think that there's, and I'll use kind of ad insertion kind of more broadly here, but I think that there's a interesting opportunity because ad insertion sits at this, connecting from the first call from the viewer and also, at the nexus of this multi-ADS responses kind of back, it has an opportunity to do some interesting things. There's certainly the blocking and tackling of, system health and are your back-end servers up and running? There's some of that obviously has to be there, but it could go deeper into ad performance to see if ad opportunities are going unfulfilled or if there are errors that maybe are unknown and not coming through in impression reports, reconciling supply and demand, if you will. There's also kind of what we talked about earlier, opportunities to gain insights into the ad experience or how viewers are consuming data or interacting with them. And lastly, there may be some opportunities to provide insights into inventory supply. So, how if you marry the viewing data up with the audience data, how companies should look at packaging inventory and optimizing it for different currencies and for different viewer experiences.
Okay. Right, I'm just going to publish the audience poll now. So you should see that any second now. There's sometimes a slight delay, but hopefully you can see that. So again, the question is, well, it's a statement, and you have to agree or disagree with it. So we need a generational upgrade in the advertising technology and processes that support connected TV in order to fully monetize this opportunity. Agree or disagree. And then you can either strongly disagree, mildly agree, or strongly agree. So I'm just going to leave that there while we carry on with the discussion. And so, Byron, let's get on to the live stuff again. I mean, obviously we gave some nice sort of sneak previews of some of the things we can do to make live better. I mean, overall, and sort of talking about things that maybe you didn't mention earlier, I mean, how do we ensure that dynamic ad insertion can cope with really big live events, and including when we're using programmatic?
Yeah, so that was one item I was thinking about when we talked about the relationship between first party and programmatic is sort of by definition, you own more of the stack when it's first party. And when you're trying to scale to giant peaks, the more you can control, the more that you run, the more you can control and make sure that you're ready for that type of traffic. A couple of tips that I think we can talk about in the DAI sense, especially with server-side ad insertion, is you can use techniques like prefetch, caching as much as you can. You really want to remove any dynamic decision-making that you can from the real time. So next week we'll have March Madness again. There'll be 1 million people watching all concurrently. Most of them will all go to break at the same time, and you do not want that giant thundering herd to hit all of your partners or even your ad system at once. So we do prefetching to make calls if you know a break is coming, spread out that traffic as much as you can. Okay,
and I mean, latency is being reduced. There's lots of great efforts to reduce latency for live, mainly because of sports. People don't want to hear their neighbours cheering first. So are we getting to a point where we had a kind of a natural lag between different unicast streamers? Are we increasingly seeing them all synced now? So this problem will actually increase over time?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. Our sports brands are the ones pushing for lower latency video. I think it will make the advertisement story more difficult because it will narrow the peaks, instead of flattening the peak.
Yeah. Okay. And Chris, I've heard you talking before about automatic resource scaling. I think you might have mentioned it earlier in the webcast, actually, and reserving cloud infrastructure capacity. I mean, just talk us through, some of the sort of things that you can do, to sort of prepare for this that you didn't mention earlier.
Yeah, so we have on the back end, we use machine learning and historical data to help on the peaks and the load, and to provision and ensure capacity is available. Certainly a recommendation I would take for other folks that they're looking for scaling just their normal traffic. I think above and beyond that, when there is a very large event, we have a number of services that we make available to our customers. Our live event monitoring services, the key one that has not only machine learning but reserved capacity and human actually monitoring systems to ensure successful delivery.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, let me show you the results of this poll then. I'm just going to push that now. Again, there might be a very slight delay for you, but hopefully they're coming up on your screen right now. I'll just read them out anyway. So the biggest answer is 53% who strongly agree that we do need a generational upgrade in how we architect the technology and processes behind CTV advertising. Very neck and neck, in fact. People who mildly agreed with the statement that we needed a generational upgrade, and those who strongly disagree. So, and then the 7% mildly disagree. So I think agree wins that, but it's not a complete slam dunk. Okay, so Chris, do you want to have a quick comment on that? Just give us 30 seconds, and then I'll move on to more questions.
Yeah, I think I could have viewed this in two ways. We certainly need a lot of there's a lot of tech challenges that we still have to solve. I think we talked a lot about those on this call, especially around as we shift to different currencies and audience data and viewer experience becomes more important. A lot of work that we have to do there. I could also view looking at we have the generational shift already when we went from the traditional traffic and billing system and everyone sees the same ad to, at least we're getting into the, dynamic ad insertion. So, hopefully this is a further evolution onto that dynamic ad insertion shift that we already had to solve these other problems.
Okay. And Jessica, can you just sort of talk us through a bit more what happens on sort of live days? I mean, you gave us some sort of tips there about analytics and error reporting, etc. But I mean, when you have a big live event, are you all in the operations control room? Have you got, I mean, just talk us through what you're looking for and how it works.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, prior to the event, definitely working with cross-functionally internally between ad ops, product engineering teams to make sure everything, going through checks, everything's lined up, looking good prior to the event, and whether that's in the ad server or on the player side, for example. And then while the event is taking place, I mean, the key, I mentioned it before, is really having like real-time analytics, dashboards where it's easy to read and understand certain metrics, and automated notifications too if certain metrics dip below certain thresholds, and this has to be across the full tech stack. And so we're definitely eyes on glass during these events across multiple teams, including say ad ops, and we are watching campaigns in real time, making sure that they are registering impressions, whether it's out of our ad server for direct IOs, our different programmatic platforms. We have server side, different dashboards as well, and some key metrics that we're watching being like, is there alignment between like viewership and ad request volumes, response times from different servers, and timeouts as well are really key, especially during high viewership times, and particularly if there's programmatic involved, the timeouts are a key metric to track across the whole like programmatic supply chain to understand if it's working correctly. Also just like fill rate, how many fills or ads are actually sent, say, to our SSAI system versus played out and registered impressions, and completion rates, and the more player side, client side analytics like player buffering, error metrics. So it's definitely a lot of hands on deck, and everyone coming together to make sure that it's the best experience possible.
Okay.
And then when something is flagged, to quickly resolve that issue, and to have postmortems to after the event, they'll come through more of the data and identify, what areas do we need to work on for improvement for the future.
Okay. And Byron, I mean, I know obviously you and other media companies use multiple CDNs, so you can switch between CDNs based on their performance. And I guess normally, or most people probably think about the whole streaming experience in terms of when you switch CDN. I mean, would you switch a CDN just based on the ad performance? Would that be a reason to start looking to move the next person into a different CDN?
Certainly, if there was something going on that we could determine that had to do with something going on with the ads, we would do that. Usually, I mean, those aren't metrics that we generally look at. We, as Jessica was saying, things like video quality, buffering, those are the ones that we're monitoring very closely to see, do we need to switch around. One thing I would call out if you're having a multi-CDN approach is you have to then try to make the CDN as pass-through as possible, so that there's a lot of capabilities that you could push to the edge networks for CDNs at this point. If you are using 4 different CDNs and you're pushing a lot of like business logic down to the edge, then you're going to have to replicate that 4 times. So that's one concern. I wanted to mention one thing about what Jessica was talking about. when we have large events, well, pre-pandemic, it looked like what you see in a NASA movie with everybody in a room, bunch of screens up, bunch of rows of people doing a bunch of things. Now it doesn't look like that, right? Now everybody's remote, and I don't know that we're going to touch on that at all, but there is a particularly big impact on the move to remote on connected TVs, because how do you do development? How do you do testing when everyone's at home? I have guys that have literally 10 TVs in their house at this point because they have to verify things on all these different devices. And it's not, you can't just get one Samsung or one whatever and it works. You have to have a whole bunch of them. So it's a pretty interesting world that we're in now with being fully remote.
Yeah, that is amazing. The thought of your sort of operations room just being spread out like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Chris, just talk us through the differences between server-side ad insertion and client-side ad insertion in relation to performance on live or just performance generally, and who uses which and why.
Yeah, first pop a note down and kind of mention in our survey what we found is that most organizations are using a combination of client-side and server-side. In particular, when you look at larger organizations, just about 100% of our respondees mentioned that they are using both. I think that this could have been from maybe some historical kind of reasons, could have historical client-side implementation or platforms that they don't want to give up viewers on that are still client-side and they just want to stick with that. Could also be, for they have larger development teams maybe than smaller companies, so they're comfortable with keeping a philosophy where they have to develop client-side technology on certain devices like Android or iOS. But I think the other thing is, even despite that, if you want to do, the stitching per se on server side, I think there's still stuff that has to be done on the clients and will require some client-side capabilities. So, we're helping some of our, server side folks that are doing server side insertion switching over to doing tracking from, server tracking to client-side tracking for their ads. So that's kind of one example, or maybe interactive ads or different ad formats may require some client-side technology still around.
Okay, and Byron, we talked earlier at the start about you using client-side for some of the sort of the new ad formats. I think you want to simplify things, though, don't you? And sort of, are you moving more towards server-side or more towards client-side? Are you looking to kind of consolidate a little bit?
Right. So we are preferring server-side as sort of the backbone of ad delivery. But as you're pointing out, if you're going to do an overlay or something along those lines, it's not really even stitched into the stream. So, which is what you're doing with server-side. So we're using server-side as the common denominator that everyone will get in terms of linear video, but based on the capability of the device, as we talked about before, not every device can handle it. We will layer on additional out-of-band type advertisement.
Okay, and Jessica, what's your sort of attitude towards client versus server side, or how you sort of move in future? Okay, Jessica, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're on mute, but I'll just ask it once more just in case, then I'll move on to Chris.
Sorry about that. I caught your question. So Sling right now has more of a hybrid model where certain functionality is server side and certain client side. We are continuing to migrate more and more to become server side. It's less stress on the player, and it also makes dev work a lot easier. Instead of updating, say, for a fix or a new feature like 13 plus clients, we can do it once in our SSAI system. However, there are certain things that will always probably be client side for DAI for us, like beaconing, for example, we believe should be client side. Certain data points still have to flow through the client side and then actually be and then passed on to the server-side ad insertion system and through our tech stack.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. And Chris, I mean, this will be the last question now because we're running out of time. So you see value in multi-DAI vendors. So I think you've got kind of a belief that just as we see in multi-CDN, where you have multiple vendors and choose between them based on performance or costs, etc., you think the same should be applied to DAI. I mean, just explain that.
Yeah, I think that, at least let me go back to the survey that we saw. One of the things that we heard pretty loud and clear is that today, just about 50% of organizations that we surveyed are using more than one DAI vendor today. If you look at the smaller or the medium and large organizations, that number increased to, certainly a majority. And we also asked the question of, what's your propensity going forward, or what's your plan? And I think it was another strong result of about 50% of saying, look, we want to keep that strategy to either optimize delivery costs or optimize delivery performance. So I think the thing that companies need to kind of just put in the back of their minds are, it may make sense to have a hybrid strategy that, has some element of client-side and server-side that we talked about, and also some that have an element of kind of multi-DAI. I think that, there's a stitching kind of piece of it, which is, perhaps commodified that can be, done anywhere through a DAI vendor. And then I think kind of the element that becomes important, though, is, maybe Byron alluded to, with some business logic that has to be pushed down to the edge. I think you have to really think through what's the strategy of how you get that business logic executed across all of your different platforms. So that'd be the kind of challenge I'd leave folks with.
Okay. Your survey, I think it said that 7% of media owners have more than 5 vendors. Was that right?
Yes, that is right. I can imagine perhaps some consolidated media companies might fit the bill there.
Yeah, right. Amazing. Okay. Right. Well, we are out of time. So I just want to thank our speakers, obviously. So Jessica from Dish Media, Byron from Warner Media, and Chris from Adobe. It was a really great discussion. Thank you for all your insights. This webcast will be available on demand. So if you want to check out anything you might have missed, or you've got a colleague who might be interested, then obviously send them the link. And that will be available fairly soon after, within sort of a few hours usually. There are resources, as I said earlier. I mean, do download them or click on the links. They're all very, very relevant to this conversation. So I just have to say thank you to our audience now. And, thanks very much, everyone, for listening.